I'm going to call the finance meeting to order. We could, all right, roll call, please.
John Regheimer is excused. Stacy Hessel.
Here.
Mark Helwig. Tom Duffy. Jeff Haney. You have a quorum.
Okay, please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have certification of compliance with the open meetings laws, please?
This meeting was noticed to the media and the public as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you. Meeting agenda. You need approval on that, right? Remind me. Yes, no, maybe?
If the agenda is set and there's no changes, you don't need approval if it's set. But
All right.
there's changes, then you need a motion.
I don't believe there's any changes, so we'll move forward. All right, number 6, public comments. I have Linda Zilmer. You have 3 minutes, please.
Linda Zilber, Edgewater property owner and property taxpayer. I'm repeating a comment that I've made in previous years, requesting that as you look at your budget timeline, which I'm glad is very detailed for this year, that whether it's the finance committee or the county board, make a decision to include in that process having your department heads present their budget to each of their committees of jurisdiction. That was kind of a practice that was done in the past. The committee members of jurisdiction better understand the departments that operate under their oversight. They understand the services that those departments provide and the personnel and the other costs that it takes to deliver those services. Washburn County, although they don't have the administrator form of government, they have what's called a budget week, and each department comes before their finance committee and goes through their entire budget, and they have to answer questions. What has concerned me is that when that does not happen, the Sawyer County Board has lost its institutional knowledge or appreciation for what the departments do. Under the budget parameters, there is not an inflation factor, and I think that might be something that is an assumption that the county might want to provide for, even though your levy limits kind of prevent you from just adjusting for it. And finally, Supervisor Hessel has made a suggestion in the past that this committee look at things, some areas more in depth other than the ambulance performance. And one area where Washburn County takes a good look at things with their finance committee is to have the zoning administrator report to them every month. And the zoning administrator reports the number of permits that were issued and whether they're for decks or garages or homes. And that way they can keep track of housing development, the fees that they're collecting, and also there are some enforcement and citations with associated legal fees. So one area this committee might want to consider is having zoning come and report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Anybody online? No. Okay, seeing none, I'll move forward. Consider approval of the meeting minutes from the previous meeting.
I so move.
Motion by Duffy, second by Haney. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion stands. Treasurer's report.
Sawyer County Treasurer, we continue to work on the interim process for 2020 delinquent taxes. February, report indicated 37 parcels. With 2020 delinquent taxes, as of filing date, it was down to 29. On the 28th of April, we filed the notice of commencement in the interim process to foreclose on these lands. The redemption date was set for July 11th. And since then, the court date has been set also for August 11th. The payment in lieu of taxes, as of the end of April there, we've received about $20,600 from the municipalities. And that list of 29 is down to 14 now. So since we've filed, people are coming in and paying and getting caught up. So it's all headed in the right direction. And that's about it. Any questions?
No, thanks for doing that.
Thanks.
All right, next, did you have a question, Mr. Hellwig?
No.
Oh, okay. 9, Finance Department report.
All right, good morning and thank you. First, we'll start with sales tax. April is up from last year, down a little bit from previous years, but that's going to be some residual from Berkey Week. So it's good to see it's up from last year, which would make sense with more of a regular Berkey Week as opposed to a year ago. Moving on to the budget performance report, we are a third of the way through the year now, through April, 4 months. Things are looking pretty good. There's some glaring omissions on here. If you look at shared revenues towards the bottom there, there's a 0. We did get some payments this week. So that's state aid comes in increments during the year, and we just got our first increment. The very last one on that first one is use of prior year's fund balance. That's where we budget that, hoping to not have to use it. So far, we're running well where we won't. We'll see when we get towards the end of the year. On the next page, on the expenses, you're going to see one little change from how I've typically done this. I think one, go down a little bit more. There is the transfer to special revenue fund. That is the, not quite. It's, oh, no, go up a little bit. Or maybe that was it. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So I started booking the transfer monthly instead of at the end of the year, so we get a better indication of where we're at. This is one, in the past I haven't done it because we haven't known if we would have to do the transfer. This one we're relying on, that transfer 169,000 is to highway. So we're anticipating that we will need to do that. So I am booking that monthly and then booking it as revenue on the highway department as well. Any questions on that? So when you get to the bottom line on the expenses, we're right at 33%, so we're in good shape overall. When I look at the next page is HHS. Another thing I started doing with HHS is they've got a budgeted drop from their own fund balance. I've started doing that monthly now too, so that their revenues are a little more true to where they're going to be. So we're still running a little behind, which again isn't uncommon in HHS. They've got a lot of grant money that takes time to claim and then receive. The expenses are running about 2% under, so that's good so far. Highway department, as I mentioned, we do have the transfer revenue booked. It's not a lot of money per month, but we're at least putting it in there to make it true. Highway always runs a month behind because Highway records everything in CHEMS, and then the following month they put it into New World. So we're always a little behind with Highway. So we're quite a bit behind the 33%. But looking at it, we're in good shape. So if you looked at a month behind, we'd be at about 25%. So we're a little behind on revenues, not bad. Again, they have some claims that they get a little bit later too, and then the expenses are running under, but we haven't started, at this point, hadn't started summer construction.
Mr. Markern, I think we have a question before you move on to the next report.
Mike, what do you mean by HHS from their own budget?
So for their budget, we had built up a fund balance in there. Like if we went back 5 years, they had to draw their fund balance basically down to 0 because of out-of-county placements for adults. And then actually in 2021, when the county had a surplus, the county put 1.3 million from the general fund to HHS to build up their fund balance again. And then in 2022, HHS had a net income of about $500,000, which added to their fund balance. And then over the last 2 years, they've gotten it up to about 2.1 million.
But they don't have their own monies per se.
They do, it's set aside. They don't have their own bank account, but we account for their whole, they have a whole separate fund from general fund. So general fund is Fund 100, HHS is Fund 225. So the monies aren't commingled in the books. They share the same bank account, but we account for everything separately.
Thanks.
Can you explain the Otter County policeman a little bit for them briefly?
Sure. So if we have a need that we can't handle within our department, we sometimes have to send people to a treatment center. And some of those are very costly. Very costly. And so adults we really struggled with up to 4 or 5 years ago. That kind of got under control. We still have some high cost ones, but it's not taking the budget way out. But now the last 2.5 years, we've seen a growth in our youth justice, which is kind of sending kids to different placements, not necessarily treatment. Some are just out of home placements. And that is costly. And that's been kind of a budget trigger the last 2.5 years. We've gone from 100 to 130,000 a year to over $1 million now in youth justice. But the hope is that catching things early, getting some help, and fewer problems down the road, fewer costs down the road.
Youth justice. Thanks. Hopefully the youth justice program that we're working on now will keep that to a minimum.
That's the idea.
Does anybody else have any questions before we move on? All right, thank you.
All right. So then moving on to the monthly CIP, we did have some activity, a couple things that we're working on. Now that the weather's better, we're working on the Huber roof for the sheriff's department and the air handler and AC upgrade. Not all of that is CIP money. I've got it all in here, but the sheriff's department is paying for some of that through a couple of their own funds. And then we did have some squad build outs from vehicles that we ordered that came in, and then they purchased a UTV for the trail enforcement. Any questions on these? So then moving into the budget timeline, as was mentioned, we did give a little more detail this year. So this is another glance. I brought it forward last month for you to look at. This is another glance. At the June meeting, I'll be asking for approval of this along with the parameters to move forward, and then I will email department heads and out-of-county organizations with instructions on how to begin preparing for their budget and CIP. One big thing I moved up is getting the budget to the newspapers. So we don't run into a problem where we don't have it posted long enough. That means there could be some changes from the time it's posted until the budget hearing. Some proposed changes anyhow, but that will help with not running into the problem we had last year. Any questions on the timeline?
Thank you for doing that.
Yep. For the guidelines, as I mentioned, as soon as finance approves the timeline and parameters, I'll send that out to department heads on June 12th, assuming it's approved. Staff request changes, normally additions are required to be back or requested back by June 30th. The budgets themselves are due June 31st or July 31st, along with CIP. By the time I send it out to staff, to department heads, I will have all the salaries and benefits put in there with a proposed increase to the cells and the steps included. We've got health insurance at a 5% increase. So far, we've been pretty lucky with health insurance. We've had a 2.5% increase and actually went backwards 5% the next year. And then we got a flat renewal for this past year. We're not tracking quite as well as we have. It's hard to keep that pace going because the cost of insurance or the cost of care goes up about 8% a year. So for us to keep the renewals we've had has been a huge blessing for us. We're running okay. I think 5% will be reasonable. We can probably negotiate to that. We just have seen a little bit of uptick of utilization this year. Capital improvement plan, again, that will be due July 31st. I'm asking for a complete 5-year plan so that we have that on file and also so that we can long-term plan. If you guys remember from the budget cycle last year, we did have some changes we moved up some things on CIP when we elected not to go ahead at the time with the communications project. My goal is always to keep
Bless you.
keep the tax levy rate either pretty flat or moderate growth. Don't want spikes and valleys because that's when people get upset. They're making their own family budget on anticipated property tax amount. So we want to keep that level. Parameters, disclaimer, they're based on current law, subject to change once the biennial budget is approved. Although that was last year, never mind.
Well, the budget probably won't be approved for the
Yeah,
next 2 years. Probably not until September is my guess.
yeah. And I had just heard that too at a meeting. Any questions on parameters? All right, moving on to legal fees by department. This is for the first quarter. There are actually some April expenses from our local attorneys in here because we get their invoices a little sooner. So you can just see both by department where we're spending money and also a little lower to which firms is the money going. Couple things I'd point out, zoning's maybe up a little bit with some responses to things, and HHS is doing some policy rewrites, and they've received some legal opinions on some of that. Otherwise, pretty normal stuff.
Any
Any
questions?
questions? Another thing that would have been on last month's agenda, but I didn't have the information yet, is just a little update on ambulance transports. That's something we're tracking to see how we're doing. It's a higher reimbursement rate, so we're trying to get as many as we can. And you can see the blue and gray lines are the billed amounts and allowable amounts. The orange and yellow lines are the running averages of those two. So the blue line ties to the orange line, the gray line ties to the gold line, and you can see that we are making a little bit of improvement, kind of a steady uptick on the running average. And it's something John Frommel's been working hard on to get more opportunities. He's worked with the local hospital and also how we're delivering the service, trying to free up a rig to do those. So just keeping you posted on that. Any questions there?
Do you have where the runs were at? What station or where they were to? You normally.
Well, these are different because these are transports, so they're generally from one facility to another. They're not
Yeah, you're right.
the traditional run, I guess.
Because we asked for a little diversity in the reports, so that's why that's different than normal. Thank you.
Yep. Moving on then to the department updates. First one we're going to look at is Circuit Court. For 24, first we'll look at. As we do these ones, we're taking a look at the previous year and the year to date. And you can see one thing I want to point out is on the revenue side, we were very strong, 110,000 over the budgeted amount. So that is good. Everything else was really in line on the expense side. We ended up at very, very close to budget, 99% of budget on the expense side. So overall, we ended up a surplus of revenue over expense, not actual cash, but from projections. We ended up being 115,000 ahead, so that's good. Great job, Circuit Court. Any questions on 24? Then moving on to 25 year to date, we are a little bit ahead on revenues, which makes sense. If we finished ahead, we should be a little ahead, a third of the way through the year. They have had, you're going to see that they're under on expenses a little bit, and a lot of that is due to they've had some vacancies. I know they lost one person to a different position within the county, so that one is filled now, I believe, but there was a little lag. So that's why they're running a little bit under for expenses, but otherwise, pretty good shape. Any questions on 25 for Circuit Court?
No, go ahead.
Moving on to criminal justice, this is our contract with Justice Point. For 24, we came in just under budget on revenues. They had a little staffing change in the middle of the year too, which led to just a little bit of an underclaim on the TAD grant. We couldn't claim what we didn't have, so we ended up underspending a little bit on that. On the expense side, I had just included the TAD expenses. We also have their pre-trial expenses. That's why we are over budget there. Wasn't a new contract, but I didn't have it in the budget, so that's on me. It's not that they overspent. They were close to what they had projected. I just omitted it. So then in 25, for revenues, where the TAD grant, which is the majority of this, actually that's what's budgeted, that is a quarterly grant claim. So we submitted first quarter, we haven't even received the revenue yet. So that's why that's down. However, the reason we have some money in there is we have an additional grant now called Deflection. So we have been claiming that monthly, and that's why you're seeing some revenue there. So we will actually get more revenue than what is budgeted here because we got the additional grant now. The contracted expenses this year are fully in there. And then I've also broken down the grants that we have. So there's the Deflection grant, pretrial, which actually is not a grant, but I just wanted to break that one out separately, and then the TAD grant. So in the original budget, I have them all in one line. Now to make it easier to do the claims and to track things better, I'm actually expensing them in different subcategories. So the bottom line will be the same, just giving us a little more detail. Any questions on that?
This might seem like a silly question, but with our current administration, these grants go away, does Justice Point go away?
They're state grants, not federal, correct?
These are state, yes. I don't know for sure if it's a state flow through, but I don't think it is. I think it's a true state grant, aren't they?
I'm not positive. I could research that, but I'm not positive. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I think that yeah.
There's been no word of these two going away. We did lose one we had applied for that we hadn't spent anything on. We hadn't hired anybody because we were waiting for final approval, but that one has gone away. That was the Building Bridges grant. So that we aren't going to receive, which would have been in addition to what you see here because that came about after the budget was done. I think it was January even. Any other questions? All right. Then the next one is Family Court Commissioner. This is a very small amount. We have an attorney on retainer that handles things that would normally go to a judge, but they're small family items. They go to this Family Court Commissioner instead.
Who is the family court?
Nussbauer, does that sound right? I can find out quickly. Newsberger.
That just changed because he's out of county. I think that just changed in the last 2 weeks because somebody determined because he's in Rusk County that they wanted someone in Sawyer County because he contacted my office to arrange his final payout from his contract.
That's right.
Yeah.
What do we pay them?
It's $1,500 a month, plus there is a flow-through grant that is about $3,000 a year that we pay out twice a year.
Glad you're moving back.
Any other questions? So then for 25, again, you're just seeing the activity of the $1,500 a month, $6,000 for the year. The payout of the flow-through grant occurs in June and December. So then moving on to district attorney. For the revenue side for 24, we did receive about 11% over budget. So it's not a huge dollar amount that we get in revenue there, but a little bit. And then on the expense side, they were also a little bit over. They had some staff changing there, and there was a switch from the regular support to moving to 2 victim wellness coordinators. And I think that, and just even a change in staff can cause a change just because of different salaries, different health insurance plan. So they ended up a little bit over. The net extra expense is about $5,000 if you subtract what they were over in revenue. So not a huge amount. Any questions for 24? Moving into 25, not a lot of revenue so far. Just $50 has come in. And then on the expense side, again, running slightly over, but nothing to be concerned about at this point. Any questions on any of that?
Thank you for doing this, especially with all of the court listings. In summary, does the second courtroom, has that been valuable financially? I'm sure it takes the weight off for the judge, the first judge, but has that been cost effective, do you feel?
I can't give a definite cause and effect, but our jail population is down.
Okay,
So
they're getting run through
There are
faster.
several factors into that, but if they're getting them through faster and they're not spending as much time in jail, then yes.
Okay,
We haven't had to transport out at all, which was a big factor the last 2 years.
okay, thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot with numbers, sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine. I would have given the same answer if I had a week to prepare because it's just hard to calculate the
Sure,
cause and effect, but the effect is we're spending a little less, yes.
okay. That might come up. I just want to prepare you. I know that I've been asked that question, so. All right, 11, investment review and update.
Yeah, so on the investment review, rates are down from a year ago, but they've actually been holding. And then just yesterday, they decided they are not going to do anything with rates. They're holding those. So there's just too much uncertainty with the economy in the future that they just held everything pat. So that won't affect rates probably. Interest income is still strong. It's not where we were a year ago. But, it's much better than when I got here. We were getting 0.25%. So Yeah, we're grateful for that. Really don't have anything else to say. We're still waiting for certification on the 2 broadband projects to write checks for the last 2 ARPA projects that were there. They were committed. We had to commit everything by December 31st of '24. And we had committed these long ago, back in '22, I believe. So we're fine there, but I'd like to write the checks and get it cleaned up. Any questions there?
Is there a due date on the opioid settlement, or does that just stay in a fund and then?
That just stays in
Okay,
a
all right. I can't remember every month, sorry.
So then next, there's a piece of paper in front of you with just 3 lines of information, 4 lines. We had the Franson CD that is coming due in May. So I would recommend replacing that CD. I put out to bid again, and the results are in front of you. Ampersand came in with a net effective rate of 4.14. Franson they compound daily, came in at 38.6 for an effective rate, and PMA WISC came in at 4.01. Quite a bit of a gap there. I would recommend going with Ampersand when the proceeds from Franson become available to purchase the CD through Ampersand. It's, again, with the uncertainty of where rates are going to be, I think I actually was pretty happy with the results here, how close it is to what we're getting with our money market. I think it would be a good move to lock that in for a year.
Is this an action item?
It is an action item.
Okay, so your recommendation is to go with Ampersand? Okay.
It's an investment
Investment.
company.
We've had stuff through them before.
Yep.
This isn't anything new. Yeah. Does
This is
anybody want to make
CD?
that motion? Correct.
CD.
I make a motion to go with ampersand for a CD when the Franson monies are available.
And I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion made by Hellwig, second by Duffy. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion approved.
I should clarify, it's a series of CDs so that we're FDIC insured with all of it.
Mhm.
$250,000 per institution, yep.
Okay. Any other questions on it? All right. Correspondence, reports from conferences and meetings. Anybody have
I
any?
do have one if nobody else has one.
You go for it, sir.
Okay. I did share this at Economic Development last Monday, but the other sheet in front of you that I handed out is a colored graph or chart. And this, 2 weeks ago now, I went to the WGFO conference down in Stevens Point. The focus was on TIDS, affordable housing, economic development, which was pretty exciting for me because normally they're just, accounting and stuff like that. So I was happy to go a little deeper into something else. And there was a very interesting study from Dane County, and I've got some numbers in front of you. The bars in green were what were provided to me, and then I did some calculations, which are the kind of bluish purple. So they had done a housing study looking at 2020 versus 2024, kind of showing the COVID effect, I guess, and just other things that had happened in that time frame. But the construction cost they were doing 10 plexes, each individual home within the 10-plex at that time in 2020 cost $226,800. When they were going to do this again in 2024, the cost rose to $416,000, which is an increase of 84% over that 4-year period. So then from there, I calculated a 10% down payment and then what would be the mortgage on that. The other thing they provided was in 2020, the interest rate was 2.9%. Moving forward to 2024, the interest rate jumped up to 7.3%. So that's an increase of 152, almost like 2.5 times what they were. And then the household income they provided. This is again for Dane County. This isn't Sawyer County data. It was 75,000 in 2020. In 2024, it went up to 88,000. So that was an increase of 17%. Obviously not keeping pace with the cost of housing. So from that information, I went out and did some calculations. I calculated what a 30-year mortgage rate would, or payment would be on the two different interest rates at the different principals. In 2020, that home could be purchased for $850,000 or $850 a month. In 2024, it jumped up to $2,569. So it tripled for the same house in 4 years. And then I also added in property tax escrow, $300 a month in 2020, jumped that up to $350 in 2024 for a little bit of an increase. Same with property insurance. I went from $100 a month to $110. That, in all honesty, almost doubled in that time frame too, at least for Sawyer County, because of the hail damage and everything. We saw huge increases up here. So that I arrived at a monthly payment then of $1,250 in 2020 and over $3,000 in 2024. So again, not tripling, but nearly tripling in that time frame. And then from there, I took the industry standard 28% of family gross income. They say that's what you can afford your house payment and escrows to be. So that would have been $1,758 in 2020, jumped up to over $2,000 in 2024. Only the 17% increase because that's based on their household income, which only went up 17%. So then I came up with a payment gap in both 2020 and 2024. So in 2020, there's actually a surplus between what a household could afford for payment and escrow of $509. But then in 2024, it went to a deficit of $975. So very unaffordable. And the down payment as a percent of household income went from 30% to almost 50% at 47%. So basically, you can't afford a home in Dane County for an average family. So since economic development, I did look at the UW extension data for Sawyer County. And I just looked at 23 just to get an idea. So the average sale of a home in 23 was $355,000. So a lot. I mean, that's not the construction cost. It's not the average value of the homes in Sawyer County, but it's the average sale price. So I just want to clarify that. Same down payment data. I used the 7.3 interest rate that was provided in that study. Rates have actually come down a little bit since 2020, or actually rates have come down a little bit now because my son just closed on a home. In 2023, I don't know what the rates were exactly, but I used the 7.3. And then the household income in Sawyer County in 2023 was $57,519. So using that data, I crunched the same numbers. The 30-year mortgage at 10% down at 7.3 is $2,241. Using the same escrow for tax and insurance, it comes up to a total payment of $2,700. Well, 28% of $57,519 is $1,342, which is less than half what is needed. So the gap is for Sawyer County with this data provided is $1,359 a month. And the down payment as a percent of income is 62%. So that's really out of the reach for the average person. So then what I also did is took the numbers in reverse, what could be affordable and what the price of a house you would have to have. So that's $199,000. If I take the same 10% down and the 7.3 interest rate with the household income of $57,000, that comes out to $1,341 actually. So, or 32, which is actually have a dollar left over that way. And the down payment as a percentage of income is 34.6%. So then from there, I just went on Zillow, plugged in that data with a 2-bedroom home, 1 bath, 1,250 square feet. And then I looked at how many homes were available. There's 4 homes in Sawyer County that fit that criteria on Zillow. Zillow's not the be all end all of real estate, but it's a pretty good indicator because they do have the MLS on there. So just some interesting data, shows what we're up against when we're trying to recruit people to come into the county
Right.
for not just Sawyer County employment, for any employment. Any questions or comments?
None of us would be able to afford to live here if we hadn't lived here for 20 years. That's what's scary.
And this isn't unique to Sawyer County, obviously.
Right.
Dane County, a lot of people would consider a wealthy county. They have the same issue. So
Anybody else have
I don't
any?
have answers. I just have,
I know that next month you will have the answers. That's what will be on the agenda for next month. How to fix the housing issue in Sawyer County. All right, does anybody else have any correspondence? Any future agenda items that I can pass on to the chair?
I do have a future agenda item. I'm working on the note issue for the communications upgrade. So for the June meeting for finance, and if approved to the board, will be the resolution to move forward with that. And then July would be the bid results and approval of the final financing.
Okay. Anyone else have anything that they would like to have added to the agenda that we can note? If you think of anything, please email Liz and Mr. Ringheimer.
John asked to keep the Act 10 on the horizon, the Act 10 issue. That's on here as kind of a standing future agenda item.
Yeah.
So he may want that on there again. Potential impact of Act 10 changes.
Okay. All right, I'll let you work with him on that. I don't see it on mine.
Well,
My
I
packet.
pulled it for this month because he wasn't going to be here and he was the one that asked for it.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right. Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn, or do you want to keep talking finances? Do you want to make a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Howig, second by Duffy. All in favor? Aye, we are adjourned.